The amount of lives that we've saved since we showed up by shutting down the border, since President Trump issued his executive orders and began deporting criminals, is already in the thousands. And by the way, we've been out looking for the 500,000 children that Biden trafficked into this country. The stories we've already uncovered of sex trafficking and labor trafficking and child abuse is beyond imagination. 500,000 minors were smuggled into this country under the last administration, and the administration not only didn't do anything to prevent it, in every way they funded it, subsidized it, facilitated it, supported it, contributed to it, that if any American citizen did these things, they'd be in jail for life. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for bringing this bill forward. I'm glad to co-sponsor it, and it's a bill that has become necessary because of the way that many districts across the country, and in the case of California, an entire state, have interposed themselves between students and their parents in the most abhorrent of ways. So let's just look at what's happened in my state of California. You have many, many districts, many documented cases of a school that has actively encouraged a child to identify with a new gender. And they did this without the parents' knowledge, without the parents' consent, and then they lied to the parents about it. We have many documented cases of a parent confronting the school and the school or personnel lying about it, and even fabricating and doctoring documents, changing the child's name on assignments that were handed in. I mean, just imagine what this looks like in practice if you are not allowed to say that the child is using a different name or a different gender identity. So you're using one name and one set of pronouns with the child in class, and their parents come in and suddenly you have to switch. You're using a different name and a different set of pronouns. This is absolute madness. So because of the prevalence of this across our state, a number of responsible districts came forward and said, we're not going to do this. We're going to put protections for students and their families into our district policy and say that this is something that parents have the right to know about. So how does the state respond? The Attorney General, with the backing of the governor, they immediately start suing these districts. They start filing lawsuits trying to get binding legal judgments that will force these districts to lie to parents. And then on top of that, the supermajority legislature passes a bill and the governor signs it that, as a matter of state law, says that we are not going to allow districts to tell parents the truth. Now, thankfully, many of those lawsuits are being rejected by the courts, and the Trump administration has now launched an investigation challenging that new state law for violating the Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act, otherwise known as FERPA. But this bill is very necessary for a number of reasons. And the other side has brought up about how children with gender dysphoria are at an increased risk of suicide. That is precisely why this bill is so important. Think about that. You have a child who has a condition that is known to be associated with an extremely increased risk of suicidal ideations, and the district says we're going to hide that information from parents? This is something that parents absolutely need to know about. It's monstrous to say we're not going to let you know that your child is at an increased risk of suicide. And finally, I want to address this idea that there's somehow a contradiction between this bill and the commitment our committee has to local control in education. That is absolutely not the case. We support local control in education because we believe that curriculum and school offerings and the different options available to parents should reflect the values of the community, that there should be direct input from the community and local elected officials, and a whole host of other reasons, such as allowing for innovation and the fact that the schools generally are not run best from Washington, D.C. But that doesn't mean that we can't have civil rights laws. We have civil rights laws in this country that provide a basic level of protection for the dignity of each person, and there are particular civil rights laws that are attendant to an educational context, including protections against discrimination on the basis of sex, and including FERPA, the Federal Educational Rights and Privacy Act. So we will continue to actively promote local control in education. I think we're going to see enormous progress in that respect from this committee, from the new administration, and it will have great benefits across the country. But we will not permit federal education dollars to be used to create a dangerous wall of separation between kids and their parents. I yield back.
It's the federal government.
I want to turn to also the $20 billion worth of clean energy grants that you terminated, because just last week a federal judge ruled that the government must unfreeze that money because the administration did not offer sufficient evidence for waste, fraud, and abuse. Now, the ruling has been stayed while the appellate court looks into the case further, but can you talk about what this judge has says is a lack of evidence? Because there are several ongoing investigations to look for that waste, fraud, and abuse, but they haven't concluded.
Yeah.
So why did you freeze the money before those investigations wrapped?
And I'm glad you pointed out that the circuit court then stopped what the district court was saying. So self-dealing and conflicts of interest, unqualified recipients, lack of sufficient EPA oversight, these were all concerns that we had. First, had the alarm raised when a Biden EPA political appointee in December was on video saying that they were tossing gold bars off the Titanic, rushing to get billions of dollars out the door before Inauguration Day, and also said with an eye towards getting themselves jobs at recipient NGOs. So for example, as it relates to unqualified recipients, there was one recipient NGO that only received $100 in 2023. They got $2 billion in 2024. They also have in their grant agreement requirement to complete a training in 90 days called How to Develop a Budget. They were amending the account control agreements days before the inauguration, reducing EPA oversight. There's all sorts of questions that you can ask me as it relates to where this money goes, because the $20 billion goes through 8 pass-through entities. EPA isn't even a party to the account control agreements once it goes to the other entities, including many other pass-throughs. If you ask me what happens to that money, basic questions, $20 billion, I couldn't even provide answers to you. Now I owe it to you, to the American public, to Congress to be able to tell them where that money goes. The idea that we're going to play along with tossing gold bars off the Titanic is something that I will not go along with. I have a zero tolerance for any waste and abuse. It is my duty to ensure that I'm an exceptional steward of tax dollars. It is my responsibility to make sure that we have more oversight of those funds.
You bring up the gold bars because of that Project Veritas video, where one former EPA advisor used that phrase. But you're not banking all of these cuts based on that one assertion, are you?
Yeah, so it's interesting because you asked me, I brought up one piece of example as it relates to that video. I talk about unqualified recipients. I talk about an NGO that's brand new that received $100 and they get $2 billion. I talk about how their grant agreement tells them that they have 90 days to complete training called How to Develop a Budget. I talk about how they're amending account control agreements just days before the election.
And the judge says that's not sufficient evidence.
Oh no, it's actually worse than that. In the judge's opinion, she doesn't even reference it. She ignores it. Now, this is one of the problems with district court judges across this entire country. They were not elected president of the United States. It is important for us to be able to fulfill our constitutional duties, to follow our statutory obligations, and it is important to be a responsible steward of tax dollars. But what shouldn't happen is ignore all of the evidence and then just say there is no evidence. The 39-page opinion of the district court doesn't even reference any of that. And if we had more time and you said, hey, Lee, why don't you provide for me 15 more examples of evidence right now? And it's up to you. I don't know how much time you have, but I could just keep going of all of the evidence and talk about self-dealing, conflicts of interest, unqualified recipients, and reduced oversight.
Administrator, I will get that from your team, and I appreciate it. We will also be watching that case as it unfolds closely. Thank you so much, and happy Easter.
Thank you.